Okay, so we'll begin today's lecture with the Phillips Pavilion by Le Corbusier. What we're interested in doing here is first tracing these curves right here so everybody can get comfortable with actually drawing in the program. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to create the profiles that we'll use to loft. And then after that, we will loft those profiles together. So let's start off with our first task here. If everybody could create a new layer, and underneath the curves, if you could hit new sublayer, and let's call this one base curves new, and hit enter. And let's make it blue so that way it's opposite of red in a way where you'll be able to really see the difference. So let's hide our reference curves. And so the only thing we should have shown right now is these red curves right here. And you'll notice that some of them are actually split where they're not one curve, and that's actually for good reason. And you'll see why in a little while. So I want you guys to first get comfortable with drawing two-dimensionally. Okay, so first things first is let's draw a line, right? And so if you notice, none of these lines are straight lines, so using a line segment just isn't going to work, right? And they're a little bit funky to be using arcs because they're not perfect half circles or anything like that. And so what I want all of us to use actually is right here. We're going to go to this curve dialog box, and let's click the little triangle in the bottom, and it'll pop it open. From there, we'll just pull it away so that way we have it. And let's just set it on top of perspective. So what do we have here? We have a control point curve, or we have an interpolated points curve. We also have some other ones here. The one we're going to actually want to use is this one right here. If you notice the difference between these two, this one you'll see that the points are on the line, where this one the points are off of the line. And I'll just draw a line I'll draw a curve really quickly just to show you the difference. So here, once I click and I go to do a second point, you notice that that point doesn't follow suit, right? And so the points are always away from the curve. And when I'm done, even if that's a flat surface, if you turn on it, you'll just, and then let's look at this one instead. So this one, when you do this one, you'll notice the point is exactly where you click. And so there's a big difference between those two. And I'll do the other one more time so you can see that the line doesn't follow suit with the point. It actually kind of does its own thing. So they're both good in their own way. The reason why we're going to use this one is because we're actually currently tracing curves right now, and it's going to help us a lot. So let's first start off by tracing this curve right here. And so let's everybody get comfortable with drawing this line right now. So the best way to do that is let's select this right here, and it's called interpolated curve. And let's everybody make sure your object snaps are on. So O snap at the bottom. And make sure your endpoint and your near is on, so that way we can trace this line. So I'm going to go double click into top view and open that up. And I'm going to start by just letting it snap right here to the endpoint. From there, I'm going to, the best thing to do is to create a lot of smaller lines versus bigger ones, because you notice if I click way out here and then I click another point, you see how much it comes off the original. So the closer you place your points together, the more accurate it's going to stay to the original existing profile. And so tighter curves are going to require a lot more points in order to stay on the same profile there. So you see how I'm doing a lot of little points, and then once it starts to straighten out, you can kind of separate them out a little bit more, and then once you hit the end point and reach the end, all you have to do is hit the space bar. And so if you turn off that original curve, you can see the new one that you created, and make sure you create it on the right layer there. So, and it should be blue. Sorry, I did not have that on the right layer. So everybody should have a new version of that same line, right? Pretty straightforward, not too bad. So let's go ahead and do that with all the rest of the lines. I'm going to start with one right next to it here. So I'm going to select it first to make sure to see how big it is. And I know that this is sort of a random point here, even though it is an endpoint. So I'm going to do the same command again. So I'm going to click it, and I'm going to start at the endpoint. Make sure you're on the right layer. And let's just go ahead and click. And once you reach the end, hit spacebar. And then let's do the rest of it. So everybody could just trace this with me. And when it's a tighter curve, make sure to add more points versus less points. If it's a straighter line, you don't need quite so many points. So the near object snap is selecting points on this line. It's saying it's nearest to this line. Even though it's not 100% accurate, you can see the difference here when I zoom in really close. It's doing its best to choose points on that line to get it as close as possible. And then your endpoint is going to allow you to select the beginning and the end of each line segment. And so let's just trace the rest of these lines here. I think I'm almost done. If you clicked a point and it didn't land where you wanted it to, you can always do Control Z. It'll back up a point. So that way, you can start your curve over again. And let me just get to the end of this guy. So if I turn off my base curves layer, the red one, I should have a new version of all those lines with my new base curves layer. The reason why I'm having you all do this is so you get comfortable actually drawing. So when you're doing your own projects, you can draw your lines and know how to start drawing before. Since I gave you this information, I want you guys to be able to know how it was done. I'm going to pause the video and make sure everybody gets to this point, and then we'll move forward. So before I move on to the next step, I just want to show everybody other methods of drawing in the 2-dimension here. You'll notice that this top portion from about here up is all curve based, and then from there it sort of starts to go into maybe solids, poly surfaces, or surfaces. So I'm just going to run through a little bit of each type here. So if I open up this first one here, the first one's line. So that's going to be your basic line right there, one line segment. The one next to it is your polyline, which allows you to do a series of lines. And then you can close that point and it becomes a closed curve. Line from a midpoint. So if I turned my midpoint on, it'll create a line actually in 2 directions instead of 1. So if you're doing something that's symmetrical, this might actually be very helpful. And really and truly, the 2 type of lines that you're going to be using most is going to be your simple line and then your polyline, which is a left click. And if you right click, it's going to give you a line segment. So what that does is it allows you, if you right click on it, so if you see that right there in the yellow, gives you the option to either click left or right click on the mouse. And so if you right click instead of left click, you'll be able to do what appears to be a polyline, but once you're done, you'll see that they're actually all individual, versus if you left click and do that same thing, they're all one versus not being one. And so right there is your lines, and that's the best way. Right here, essentially these first 2 right here are the best way to draw line segments. I showed you just now for this. If you want to do a little bit more experimental, and I'll turn off my ortho, you can get more of a curvature there. And then I'll do the same thing but with this version, and you can see the difference. You don't quite get as much variation in it. And yeah, these 2 are going to be your main ones. The one I use the most is this one that I showed you guys for part of the lesson. And so that's how you create more of like spline type curves. Beneath these two is your circles. We've gone over circles. You can do a circle from a center point. You could do a circle from one edge to another, which is basically a diameter. You could do a circle from 3 points, right? This will be a circle around a curve. So if you select a curve, it'll do a circle on that curve. And if I get out of top view, you can see it's vertical. So that could be really useful. And yeah, so there's your curves, or I'm sorry, your circles. Next to your circles is ellipses. And so it's sort of the same exact functions there. Everybody, I just want you to get used to seeing the different ways you can do things here and the different options you have for 2D drawing. You can use a rectangle to make an ellipse, and it'll use the center point. And let's see here. Yeah. So under that we have our arcs. So I'm going to pull the arcs out. For the arcs, this first one here is the arc center, and then so I chose the center, a start, and now I can choose an endpoint for that arc, and it'll create it for me. This one's a little more free form right there, so you choose a start and an end, and then you decide how much you want the arc to be. This one's a start and direction to start, so you can see how it's controlled based off the start point there. And this one's pretty similar too. So there's your arcs. Next to your arcs you have rectangles. So maybe instead of drawing rectangles, you can actually just, instead of drawing rectangles from a series of line segments or polylines, you can actually just click and make a rectangle. You can also do it from a center point, kind of like how a circle is. And you can even type in, let's say 5 by 5, and now it's giving me a 5 foot by 5 foot box. This one's from 3 points, so let's say you know what you want there, and then from there you can stretch it outward. And so those are pretty useful rectangle curve commands. And then beneath that we have our more polygonal shapes. So here you can click in from a center point. Something that you can do, which is really nice about this, is you can change the number of sides. Because it's a polygon, it has multiple sides, and so you have the availability to choose. And if you look up here in the hyperlink right here, it says number of sides. You can change that, and I'm going to hit N because that's the underlined number, or the underlined part of the word. And now it's asking how many sides. So now I could go and say 8 sides. Now it's going to give me an octagon, right? And I can change that again to even more sides, so 16 sides, and eventually it'll become a circle, right? But it's always going to have individual line segments there. And so let me change this back to like 5. So this is a midpoint one. I've never used the star before. There we go. So now you can see, using the star right here, you click, it's going to give you your polygonal shape, and then from there you're able to go back to your center point. So maybe this might be somebody's wants to use this profile for their project. You know, this is a simple way to do it right there, and you can actually make it very calculated too by using whole dimensions instead of just what I'm doing right now to show you. And then this is all just curve tools. So this is commands that you could do to edit your curves. So you have fillet. I think everybody probably knows what a fillet is. Fillet would be if you have 2 lines on the same plane that aren't touching each other. If you go to fillet, when you click that, you can select both lines and it'll connect them together at a point. I'll do that again. And you can see that right there. You also have the option of creating a radius. So if I were to click radius there and hit 1 and then did those, you'll see instead of it coming to a point, it actually came to a curve. So that's the fillet command. You also have chamfer. So chamfer is going to give you a straight line instead. So if I do that, see how it's giving me a straight line instead of a curved one? There's so many here to look at. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I definitely want everybody just to be aware that all this stuff exists and to look at it all. And if you have questions about it, just remember that you can always say, I don't know what change degree is. If I go change degree and then go to help over here, that it's going to eventually load up and tell me exactly what it is. So if you ever have any questions, don't forget that there's a help. Okay.